The night my father laughed in my face about the $144,000 I'd given them, something inside me finally snapped. But to understand why that laugh hurt so much, you have to understand the promise it started 12 years earlier on a quiet Sunday evening in my parents' kitchen. I was 22, freshly graduated from college, and sitting at the same wooden table where I had eaten breakfast before school for most of my life. Outside, the sun was setting, casting warm orange light through the window above the sink. My mom was stirring a pot of chicken soup, the smell filling the kitchen with the kind of comfort that made you forget the world outside. Dad sat across from me with his reading, glasses perched low on his nose, scanning the newspaper like he always did after dinner. In front of me sat an envelope. Inside, it was the letter that felt like my ticket to adulthood. My first real job offer. Accounting assistant. I said, still unable to hide the excitement in my voice. Starting salary is $52,000. Mom turned around with a proud smile. Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Dad folded the newspaper and leaned back in his chair. Not bad. For a first job, he said. You start next month? Yeah. For a moment, the kitchen was quiet except for the bubbling soup. Then Mom said something that changed everything. You should move back home. I blinked. I already live here. She laughed softly. I mean, stay here for a while instead of getting an apartment. Dad nodded slowly. Rent out there is ridiculous. That's true, I admitted. A tiny one-bedroom near my office cost almost $1,600 a month. It felt impossible on a starting salary. Mom turned off the stove and joined us at the table. We've been talking about it, she said. Dad cleared his throat. What if you paid us rent instead? I frowned slightly. How much? Dad didn't hesitate. $1,000 a month. I leaned back in my chair. That's actually a lot cheaper than anywhere else. Mom smiled warmly. But here's the important part. I looked at her. We won't spend it, she said gently. What do you mean? Dad clasped his hands together. We'll save every dollar. I stared at him. Save it? For what? For you? The words hung in the air. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. Think of it like forced savings. You give us the rent each month, and we put it into an account for your future. Dad nodded approvingly. Most young people waste money. New cars, expensive apartments, eating out every night. He gestured toward the house. But if you stay here for a few years, that money will grow. Mom smiled. And when you're ready to buy your own place someday, you'll have a huge down payment waiting. I remember laughing nervously. Wait, are you serious? Completely, Dad said. I tried to process it. Why wouldn't I just save the money myself? Dad shrugged. Because people your age don't. Mom added softly. This way you won't be tempted to spend it. They both looked at me like they were offering the smartest deal in the world, and maybe they were at least. That's what I believed. Okay, I said slowly. Let's do it. Mom clapped her hands together happily. You'll thank us someday. Dad raised his coffee mug. To smart financial decisions. I lifted my glass of water to the future. At that moment, everything felt right. Safe, certain, like my parents were building a bridge to the life I wanted. The first month felt strange. After my first paycheck arrived, I sat at my laptop staring at the banking app. $1,000. Transferring that? Much money felt different than I expected, but Dad had told me to label the transfers clearly so we could track the savings. So I typed something simple in the memo line. Savings plan. I hit send. A few seconds later, Mom's phone buzzed across the room. She glanced at it and smiled. First payment received. Dad gave me a thumbs up. Smart move. I remember feeling proud. Responsible. Like I'd just taken my first real step into adulthood. Life settled into a routine. I woke up early every morning, grabbed coffee with Dad before work, and drove to the office downtown. My job was boring sometimes. Spreadsheets, receipts, endless numbers, but I didn't mind. Every month I transferred the same amount. $1,000 savings plan. Mom always acknowledged it. Got it? She'd say. Your future house fund is growing. Sometimes she even joked about it. You'll probably buy a mansion before we retire. Dad would laugh. Don't give him unrealistic expectations. Years passed faster than I expected. The house didn't change much during those years. The same beige walls, the same creaky staircase. The same worn couch in the living room. But my life slowly did. My salary increased. I got promoted twice. Friends moved out, got married, started families. Sometimes they teased me about still living with my parents. Man, you're 30 and still at home? My friend Jake joked once at a bar. Temporary, I replied. What's the plan? Saving for a house. Jake whistled. How much do you have saved? I smiled. A lot. And it felt good saying that. Because in my mind, somewhere in a bank account with my parents' names on it, my future was growing. Around year 5, Mom mentioned the savings again during dinner. You know, she said, passing the salad bowl, you've probably saved over $60,000 by now. I nearly dropped my fork. Seriously? Dad nodded proudly. See? Discipline works. It felt incredible hearing that. $60,000 at 27 years old. That felt like a fortune. I worked harder after that. Longer hours, bigger responsibilities, but the plan never changed. Every month, 1,000. Every transfer labeled the same way. Savings plan. Then something unexpected happened. Her name was Emily. We met at a friend's birthday party. She was standing near the kitchen counter, laughing at something someone said, her dark hair falling across her shoulder. I remember thinking she looked like someone who belonged in sunlight, not noisy bars. We started talking about work. Then books. Then travel. The conversation stretched. Late into the night, before leaving, she smiled at me. You're surprisingly interesting for an accountant. I laughed. And you're surprisingly kind for someone making fun of accountants. She handed me her phone. Put your number in. Dating Emily felt easy. Natural. We went on simple dates at first. Coffee shops, walks in the park, cheap pizza, and late night movies. Eventually she asked the question everyone asked. So, do you live alone? I hesitated. Technically, no. She raised an eyebrow. Roommates? My parents. She looked surprised for a second, but then I explained the arrangement. The savings. The house fund. Her expression softened. That's actually really smart. I smiled. Yeah, my parents came up with it. You must trust them a lot. I didn't even hesitate. Completely. 3 years passed with Emily. By the time I turned 34, our lives were deeply connected. She knew my routines. My favorite foods. My bad habits. She also knew my dream, owning a home. One Saturday afternoon, we drove through a quiet neighborhood filled with maple trees. The leaves rustled softly in the wind. As we walked up the steps of a small 2-story house, the front porch creaked slightly under our feet. Inside, sunlight streamed through a big living room window. The house wasn't huge, but it felt warm. Peaceful. Like a place where life could happen. Emily walked slowly through the kitchen, touching the counter lightly. This feels like home. The realtor smiled. It's listed at $420,000. Emily glanced at me. What would the down payment be? About $150,000. My heart beat faster. I'd almost exactly that amount waiting. Or at least I thought I did. Emily squeezed my hand as we walked back outside. Do you think you're ready? I smiled. I've been ready for 12 years. That evening, I drove home feeling excited. Nervous. But hopeful. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived. The same kitchen where the promise had begun. Mom was folding laundry. Dad was scrolling through his phone. Hey, I said. Sitting down. Mom smiled. How was your day? Good. Dad glanced up. What's up? I took a deep breath. Remember the savings plan we started years ago? Mom laughed softly. The rent money? Yeah. Dad leaned back in his chair, so what about it? I tried to keep my voice calm. Emily and I found a house today. Mom's eyes widened. That's wonderful. And I was hoping we could start preparing the savings for the down payment. For a moment, no one spoke. Dad stared at me. Then something strange happened. He started laughing. Not a quiet chuckle. A loud, uncontrollable laugh. I frowned. Wait. What's funny? Dad wiped tears from his eyes. Oh my God, he said. You actually thought we were saving that money for you. My stomach dropped. I turned toward Mom. She wouldn't look at me. Mom? I whispered. Dad leaned forward with a smirk. That was rent, son. My heart started pounding. But you said a lot of things. My voice trembled. That's $144,000. Dad shrugged like it was nothing. You lived here 12 years. But you promised. He rolled his eyes. You're 34 years old. Then he said the words that shattered everything. Grow up. The room felt suddenly smaller. Colder. Like every memory inside. That house had just been rewritten. I stood there in silence. 12 years. 12 years of trust. Gone. And my father was still smiling. But what he didn't realize was that the laugh echoing through that kitchen would become the biggest mistake he ever made. The night my father laughed about the $144,000, I packed a suitcase and left. No shouting, no broken dishes. No dramatic scene like the ones you see in movies. Just silence. Sometimes silence carries more weight than anger ever could. My hands moved slowly around my room, pulling clothes from drawers that had been in the same place since I was a teenager. Every item I packed felt strangely heavy, like it carried a memory attached to it. The desk where I studied in high school. The shelf where my old trophies gathered dust. The bed where I'd spent thousands of nights believing this house was the safest place in the world. Now it felt like a stranger's home. Downstairs, the television hummed softly in the living room. My parents had already moved on. As if the conversation about 12 years of savings had been nothing more than a passing comment. When I carried my suitcase down the stairs, my father glanced over from the couch. You going somewhere? He asked casually. His tone was the same one he used when I went out with friends. I stood there for a moment, gripping the suitcase handle. Yeah, he muted the TV. Where? I opened the front door. Cold night air rushed inside. Somewhere that doesn't charge me $144,000 for trust. For the first time that night, he frowned. But I didn't wait to hear what he would say next. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Emily was already waiting in the driveway. When she saw my suitcase, her face softened. You're staying with me, she said gently. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just nodded. She pulled me into a tight hug. For a moment, everything I had been holding inside cracked open. Not anger, not rage, just deep, overwhelming sadness. 12 years. I kept repeating that number in my head during the drive to her apartment. 12 years of believing my parents were helping me build a future. 12 years of trust. Gone in 5 minutes. That night, neither of us slept much. Emily's apartment was small but warm. The living room window overlooked the quiet city street below, and distant traffic hummed like white noise in the background. I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the conversation over and over again. You actually thought we were saving that money? Every time I remembered his laugh, something twisted painfully in my chest. Emily eventually walked out of the bedroom wrapped in a blanket. You're still awake. Yeah, she sat beside me and rested her head on my shoulder. Do you want to talk about it? I shook my head slowly. I keep thinking maybe he's right. She lifted her head. What do you mean? Maybe I was stupid for believing them. Emily stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, Something simple but powerful. Trusting your parents isn't stupidity. I swallowed hard. It feels like it. She stood up and walked toward the small desk in the corner of the room. Come here. I followed her. On the desk sat my laptop. Emily had opened my online banking history. Rows and rows of transactions filled the screen. Every month. Every year. $1,000. She pointed to the memo column. Each line said the same thing. Savings plan. I felt my heart skip. I had forgotten about that. Back when the arrangement started, Mom told me to label the transfers so we could track the savings. Emily crossed her arms. This isn't rent. I blinked. What? This is documented savings. But the money went to their account. Yeah, she said. But the purpose of the payments is right here. She tapped the screen. You didn't just trust them. You created a paper trail. A strange feeling started building in my chest. It wasn't anger. It wasn't relief. It was something unfamiliar. Hope. 3 weeks later, I sat in a quiet office across from a lawyer named Mr. Patel. He was in his late 50s with silver hair and calm, thoughtful eyes. He studied the printed bank records carefully. You've been making these transfers for 12 years? Yes. And every memo says savings plan? Yes. Did your parents ever object to that wording? No. He flipped through several pages of statements. Did they verbally confirm that the money was being saved for you? Many times. Mr. Patel leaned back in his chair. Well, he said slowly, that makes things interesting. My hands tightened in my lap. Interesting how? He adjusted his glasses. If someone knowingly accepts money under the representation that it's being held for the sender, and then spends it, he paused. That could qualify as financial misrepresentation or unjust enrichment. My heart started pounding. You mean I might actually have a case? He nodded thoughtfully. Possibly. The word hung in the air. For the first time since that night in my parents' kitchen, the future didn't feel completely shattered. The lawsuit shocked my parents. My father called me the same day they received the legal notice. His voice exploded through the phone. What the hell is this? I closed my eyes. You know what it is. You're suing us? He shouted. You took my savings. That was rent. You promised it wasn't. You lived here. And you told me it was a savings plan. There was a moment of silence. Then his voice turned cold. You're destroying this family. I felt something inside me finally harden. No, I said quietly. You did that 12 years ago. And I hung up. Court took months. Long, exhausting months. Lawyers exchanged documents. Statements were written and evidence was collected. Emily stood beside me through all of it. Some days I almost wanted to give up. Not because the case was weak, but because it felt surreal. I wasn't supposed to be sitting in a courtroom across from my own parents. But every time doubt crept in, Emily reminded me why I was there. This isn't about revenge, she said one night. It's about truth. The trial itself lasted only 3 days. But those 3 days felt like years. My father testified. First, he spoke confidently. That money was rent, he told the court. He lived in our house for 12 years. The judge asked calmly, then why were the transfers labeled savings plan? Dad hesitated. That was just his wording. And he never corrected it? No. Then my mother took the stand. She looked nervous. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. We needed the money for household expenses, she said softly. But did you ever tell your son that? The lawyer asked. She looked down. No. Emily squeezed my hand under the table. Then something unexpected happened. Mr. Patel presented a printed screenshot, an old text message from my mother. It was dated 7 years earlier. The lawyer read it aloud. Don't worry, honey. Your house fund is growing every month. The courtroom went silent. My mother's face turned pale. Even my father looked stunned. The judge studied the message carefully. And in that moment, I knew the truth had finally spoken for itself. The verdict came on a rainy Tuesday morning. Emily and I sat side by side in the courtroom. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together. The judge adjusted his glasses and began reading the decision. Based on the documented transfer descriptions, supporting communications, and testimony, every word felt like it echoed off the walls. The court finds that the defendants misrepresented the purpose of the funds. My heart pounded. The defendants are ordered to repay $144,000 plus legal costs. For a moment, everything went quiet in my mind. Emily squeezed my hand tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Across the room, my father looked furious. My mother looked like she might cry. But strangely, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Like I had just finished the longest, hardest chapter of my life. 6 months later, Emily and I stood in front of the small house with the maple trees. The same house we had visited that first day. The front porch creaked as we stepped onto it. The realtor handed me the keys with a smile. "Congratulations." Emily wrapped her arms around me. "You did it." I looked at the key in my hand. For 12 years, I believed someone else was building this moment for me. But the truth was different. "We did it," I said softly. We stepped inside together. Sunlight filled the empty living room. Dust floated gently in the air. It was quiet, peaceful, honest. No lies, no broken promises. Just a future we were finally free to build ourselves. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Your father doesn't understand why you went this far. But I do. I'm sorry." I sat in the empty living room thinking about that sentence. All the years. All the trust. All the damage. Finally, I typed a reply. "I didn't go this far for the money." I paused for a moment, then added one more line. "I went this far because trust should mean something." I set the phone down. Outside, the wind rustled the maple trees. Emily walked into the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to me and smiled. Our first night in our house, I looked around the room, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt something peaceful settle inside my chest. Not anger, not sadness, just freedom. Because the house I was standing in wasn't built on lies, it was built on truth. And that made it worth far more than $144,000.